Police Service has charged a man with public incitement of hatred. Since the beginning of the year, we have received more than a dozen complaints from citizens regarding two men carrying signage and allegedly publicly inciting hatred in the downtown core. The messages were targeted towards two specific individuals, as well as a specific community within the downtown core. Milan PAPEZ, 72, of Calgary, has been charged with 4 counts of public incitement of hatred and 1 count of defamatory libel. Charges against another man are pending. As defined by the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 319 sub 1, charges of public incitement of hatred are warranted when, by communicating statements in any public place, they incite hatred against any identifiable group, when such incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace. Anyone with information about this case or any hate-motivated crime or incidents is asked to call police or Crime Stoppers.
Can you kind of explain when it changes from, somebody expressing their opinion to this criminal code matter?
Essentially, when we're talking about hate speech, hate propaganda, there are 3 sections in the criminal code that address that: advocating genocide, public incitement of hatred, and promoting hatred. Now, under our Charter of Rights here in Canada, we have freedom of expression. It's guaranteed, okay? But that freedom of expression is not absolute. There have been limits placed on our freedom of expression in the form of these 3 sections by the courts. If all the criteria are met, and the threshold is relatively high in terms of the hate, then we're able to lay these charges. Oftentimes, we're dealing with things that are very offensive, but they don't meet that level of hate that is required, and it's actually very technical in terms of investigating these, these 3 sections.
But in this case, it was not only offensive, but it reached a higher threshold.
In this case, if you take into consideration the message, the words that were used, where the message was being delivered, the targeted audience, the method of delivery, when you take that all together, yes, the threshold was met for public incitement of hatred.
And by publicly inciting, like, is that just because people were, were people starting to respond? Like, I've seen him downtown before.
Based on some of the, the individuals that I've spoken to that have come forward and offered statements, without getting into detail, obviously, in terms of the investigation, what I can say is I've been struck by how much this has upset people in the community, not only the Chinese community, but the Calgary community at large. Many people have expressed disgust, and they've expressed how this has affected them personally, how it's very upsetting. So yes, I would say that in that sense, when we're talking about disturbance of the peace, it doesn't necessarily have to be a fistfight. If somebody is disturbed by what's happening, and to the extent that they're going to call police, then we do have a breach of the peace.
And was it all with his signs downtown, or was it also his online activity included in the charges?
It all forms part of the investigation, without getting into the specifics. Certainly, I would acknowledge that he does have a website.
Is there anything else you can say about the victims in this case and how they've been impacted?
I can't speak to the victims in terms of the impact on them. Typically what you see in any kind of hate crime is it is very impactful on victims, because often it's very personal. Someone is being targeted because of something they can't change: color of their skin, their sexual orientation, their particular sex, their age, those sorts of things. So because it's very personal, people internalize that, and it's very much more impactful on victims. Often you see anger, you see frustration, you see hurt.
This guy's been around for a long time, and he's been doing this sort of activity. What's changed?
Essentially, like I said before, when we're dealing with the hate propaganda offenses, the threshold is very high in terms of laying charges. The reason for that is because we have freedom of expression in the country. And when these laws were created, the intent was not to censor speech, not to censor people's opinions, not to chill debate about important societal issues, but really the intent was to curtail the kind of hatred, discriminatory language, the kind of racism really that, when it's vocalized in that manner, is likely to lead to discrimination against a particular group, is likely to lead to ill treatment. So that's kind of the threshold that we're talking about. So until we reach that threshold, we can't lay charges. And in this particular case, we have reached the point where, based on the totality of the circumstances, the criteria for that charge have been met.
So he hasn't been charged before, though, for this
I can't speak to that because I'm not 100% certain about that in terms of whether he's been charged or not. But in the recent years, that I've been, aware of the situation, no. This is, since I've been the hate crimes coordinator in 2012, this is the first time I've been involved in terms of a criminal investigation where charges have been laid.
When you talk about inciting and breach of peace, could that include like a violent reaction from the targeted group?
Well, essentially, the section is inciting hatred towards an identifiable group, okay? That's likely to lead to a breach of peace. So it's part of the whole. Essentially, what you need in these types of situations, you need communicating statements, and that could be verbal, that could be signage, it can be a different medium, right? Communicating statements in a public place, has to be in a public place, that incites hatred towards an identifiable group. Identifiable group, for example, would be based on religion, based on ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, those sorts of things. That's likely to lead to a breach of the peace. In other words, because of the message and the words that are being put out there, because of the activity, it's likely that it's going to lead to a breach of the peace. So,
could that breach of the peace be like a reaction? So if someone walked into a gay bar and started spouting homophobic phrases, I mean, you're really doing that to get in their face, and I mean, is that the type of breach that's contemplated, or does it have to be a breach that the hatred spreader is trying to incite in someone else, like you join me and hate this group?
Essentially, we don't have to have a breach of the peace to lay the charge. It's likely that it could lead to a breach of the peace. It's kind of what we need, right? So a breach of the peace could be someone being very upset, and reacting verbally. It could be somebody getting very upset and assaulting maybe the person that's doing the incitement, and that's certainly something that we're very concerned about, in terms of. Yes.
Do you know, is this charge rare, and does it have a harsh penalty?
It's relatively rare. The last time that I'm aware of that charges were laid here in Calgary for public incitement of hatred were in 2009. So we don't see them that often, and that's probably typical across Canada. Some of the other charges, for example, advocating genocide, as far as I know, we've never had a case actually before the courts in Canada. Promoting hatred, we have had cases, again, they're fairly rare. Keekstra here in Alberta was an example, kind of a landmark case in terms of promoting hate.
Do you know what the penalty potentially is?
It's a due procedure offense, which means it can be kind of dealt with either as a summary conviction offense, which would be like 6 months in jail and a fine, or it can be dealt with as an indictable offense. And then I can't say for sure, I believe it's 2 years, but the maximum.
Was he specifically in the Chinatown area or anywhere else downtown?
In this particular investigation, this was in the Chinatown area, or right thereabouts, at or near.
It wasn't also further downtown?
Well, that plays into it, in the sense that when we're talking about the defamatory libel, that didn't just take place in Chinatown. That took place also near the courthouse. Yeah.
Anything you can say on the two people that were specifically targeted, Landhafner as well as the mayor? If there's anything you can say on that?
I can't really speak, necessarily about the victims or speak for them. I think it's out there publicly as it is. Certainly, like I said before, anytime somebody is targeted, because of their ethnicity, their religion, their race, it is very hurtful and it's very damaging to the person. And it's damaging to that person's community. For example, if I'm Jewish and I'm targeted because I'm Jewish, it also affects the Jewish community. And when we're talking about something like, when it's based on race, then really that affects the whole community, because we have a very diverse and vibrant community here in Calgary. And when you have these types of crimes, it has the potential to kind of tear at the social fabric of that community. So it's very negative all around. In terms of this particular investigation, the mayor is not considered a part of this. Yeah.
Like there's only one individual, isn't there, that is named separately from the Chinese community? Two.
In total, there's 2 individuals. Yes. So one of them has already been mentioned by someone here, but the other individual I really don't know much about, actually.
Do you know his or her race, or what would be the reason for them being targeted?
I think the other individual is Asian.
Specifically Chinese, because the other.
Oh, that I couldn't say.
Targeted Chinese, so.
That I couldn't say because I don't know. Yeah.
And is there somebody else that's going to be charged then as well?
There is another individual where charges are pending, yes.
Is it the person's son?
Well, because charges haven't been laid yet, I can't speak specifically to that.
Can you say whether or not they're related, though?
I can't really speak to that. Very soon, though, well, very soon. We do have a continuing investigation. These charges are pending against this other suspect. And as soon as we have laid those charges and the suspect has been before Justice of the Peace, then we will be releasing that information.
Oh, can I just ask, did you seize the signs and stuff like that?
We do have some of the signs, yes.
Like, does he still have any of them? Like, or would have they all been taken away from him?
I couldn't say whether he has some or not.
But you did see some.
We did see some in the course of the investigation, yes.